Team, as Mr. Mark Johnson, that is going to be our next briefer, our team get the slides ready. Definitely wanted to kind of point to something that Art did mention. Those that are attending virtual really need our help here to make sure that we speak to a microphone. So we got Mr. Randall roaming around, but if not, we got a microphone in the center. So to make sure that those teams online can actually listen to the conversations and questions are being asked, please find your way to a microphone, raise your hand. We'll try to get one to you to kind of facilitate what that is. So also, thank you for holding the questions all the way to the end. Allow the presenters to kind of go through the information. Now we're going to have Mr. Mark Johnson kick us off, and we will continue move the agenda. So, Mark.
Good morning, everyone. Before I get into my presentation, I want to take just a second to call up Mr. Michael Henderson to give you an introduction. We have a robotics demonstration that's a result of some of the work, the products resulting from our Spectrum Relocation Fund activity. So, Mr. Henderson, would you please give us an intro for that demo?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. My name is Michael Henderson, and the robot that you saw out front is the MITRS 2 robot, and how it relates to spectrum allocation is that the radio on that robot needed to move out of the spectrum. So Don CAO and the Indian Head team developed a radio called the Flexible Cyber Secure Radio. It is a radio that is able to operate on multiple frequencies. It covers S, L, upper C, and lower C. It's MPU based, so it has radio cards that you can swap in and out. It can also work up to the classified level, up to secret, as a result of an integrated chip that we are called the Mini Crypto that we developed with the Air Force. One of the unique things about Flexer is that once you have the radio, it's not considered a high value asset, so you don't have to keep it in a SCIF or anything like that. So it can switch between frequencies up to secure comms and not necessarily considered a high value asset. So when you're done here, come outside, take a look at the radio. It may hand you some candy, or if you want to give it a go on the sticks, enjoy yourself. All right? Thank you.
Thanks, Van. Appreciate it. Very good. Okay, great. We got slides up. So let's go to the next slide, please. So I got a lot of topics to cover here. I'm going to do mostly the wave tops. Sir? Someone say something? Okay. I'm going to cover mostly wave tops. These first three that we see here are an attempt to help you understand my role, who exactly is talking to you. Yes, I did mention I'm the CNO's lead for electromagnetic environmental effects. And by the way, let's just agree to use the acronym E-cubed. It just saves a lot of time. Lead for E-cubed and Spectrum. And you've heard from my boss, Vice Admiral Thomas, this morning, which I'm still amazed that we were able to get his time. But I want you to understand my role so that we can, throughout the week, engage a little more effectively, especially of how you might be able to bring me information that I can help race to the leadership level, and that includes Vice Admiral Thomas. Right. So it's all about our interactions this week to affect positive change, especially to influence our leaders, such as Vice Admiral Thomas. As we've already mentioned a couple of times, and I think as I introduce Vice Admiral Thomas, a lot of what you're going to see here involves messaging. Improving the effectiveness of messaging. As Art was describing, it is a very, very hard habit to break from the geeky language into something that's meaningful for leadership, not only for leadership at the operational sense, but for leadership at the congressional sense. So there's concrete ways to visualize what impacts are. And that's why that video we saw this morning, in my opinion, is a way to communicate what is at stake, right? What is required for our operations. So it's about messaging. It's about messaging at the leadership level, and it's about having a cohesive messaging, not only within the Navy and Marine Corps, but across the services. So you're going to see that theme articulated as I go through my slides today. So let's go to the next slide. So I don't want to focus a lot on organization, and certainly what you see here is a soda straw of organization. It's oversimplified, so that we can try to help understand a little bit about, okay, so what am I doing here? What am I, Deputy Mr. David Wills? What are we doing, and how can we influence and affect? It's a limited view of E-cubed and spectrum organization functionality. E-cubed and spectrum, as shown, and as I mentioned this morning, we're under Vice Admiral Thomas. That's OPNAV N2N6. And certainly the E-cubed office, as shown here, is under Tactical Networks in C3. I'll say this: spectrum functions are matrixed over numerous codes under N2N6, and you're going to see that in a couple of the future slides, a couple of slides ahead. In this case, what you're seeing here, the yellow blocks are a flow down of the E-cubed and spectrum requirements. That's what OPNAV does. We set requirements. The blue blocks are a flow down for funding, roughly a flow down of funding, and that includes the resourcing of the Navy and Marine Corps Spectrum Center. And I believe many of you, all of you, are likely familiar with the Navy and Marine Corps Spectrum Center, NMSC, and through my office, we are a fundamental funder of the NMSC. Not the only funder, because they get a substantial, very significant amount of money from Fleet Forces. And among the going through the flow down, among the SysComs, I will make this comment about NAVC. They do have the E-cubed Tech Authority for ships and subs, just like NAVAIR has the E-cubed Tech Authority for aircraft and air systems, and NAVWAR has for communications systems. But OPNAV is also assigned to function as our coordinator, our OPNAV coordinator of SysCom products performed under Spectrum Relocation Fund, just as a matter of explanation. And I think as my deputy, Mr. David Willis, goes through his presentation, that'll become a little more, he'll elaborate more on that for you. Let's go to the next slide, please. Right, so I'm not just making up that I'm the CNO lead for E-cubed, but there's a root from which we derive that responsibility, in this case, SecNav Instruction 2400.1 Bravo. And so I've just called out the pertinent sections here, the specific sections, in case you didn't believe me, and I'm sure you do believe me, but yes, I am the requirements officer for Navy Marine Corps Spectrum Center, Manpower. I also have under my resource sponsor role, or requirements officer role, the Electromagnetic Pulse Survivability Program, the Shipboard Electromagnetic Compatibility Improvement Program, with a corresponding Navy training systems plan for E-cubed and spectrum management. And you're going to hear about the training aspects of E-cubed and spectrum later this week from Mr. Rich Segara. So I believe that's on Thursday, and I encourage you to participate in that discussion. As a related and relevant segue here, I am proud to have led the development and introduction of real-time spectrum operations, that's RTSO, including the earliest experiments and development of the own force monitoring functionality. That was until OPNAV purposefully and appropriately transferred RTSO, real-time spectrum operations, from my office to OPNAV N2N6W. And we'll talk, I'll elaborate just slightly on that in a slide or two. I will say this as a commentary. SEMSIP provides a key supporting role. These are my words, by the way, it's my paraphrase. SEMSIP provides a key supporting role in RTSO from an EMI prediction and resolution standpoint, and from a training standpoint, which relates to the Navy Training Systems Plan that I mentioned previously. There's a key flavor here. My office sets the requirements for cross-warfighting domain electromagnetic compatibility and spectrum supportability for the Navy. Yeah, I wrote a note to myself remembering the comment about the phrase "go tough," be able to design. That would be to be able to design out identify and mitigate EMI. Key points made during our morning's discussions. Let's go to the next slide, please. So here's the promised slide I was talking about to show you the intent. Number one, I stole this, or I lifted it from Randy Witz's presentation from NIWITIC to make a point, not to steal his thunder. And thank you, Randy, for letting allowing me to steal it. You didn't give me permission, but I did anyway. The point here that I think we are all aware of is E cubed and spectrum runs through all of these elements that they're in this discipline, if you want to call it, electromagnetic spectrum operations. It's key, and Vice Admiral Thomas certainly underscored that this morning. And yet, I am not the requirements officer for any one of these capabilities. And yes, spectrum management is listed as a central part of that circle. Within that larger golden colored circle, spectrum management is key. But even at that, I'm not the sole owner of spectrum management, because if you have a tool like real-time spectrum operations, it's no longer under my portfolio anymore. But the key elements of what I do resource, SIMSIP and EMP, other elements have a supporting role in that. And certainly, even though I don't own any of these other capabilities, and just let me give you an example what I'm talking about here. As I mentioned, OPNAV N2N6W, the W Whiskey is the CNO lead for EMZO and for surface electronic warfare. Another example, OPNAV N2N6 Echo, N2N6E is the CNO lead for meteorological and oceanographic systems. And then similarly, OPNAV N2N6Q, Quebec is the CNO lead for Intel. My point here is that spectrum is matrixed across OPNAV, like it is, I'm sure, among many organizations. And even though my office doesn't own any one of these particular capability areas, we're fundamental to all of them, because one example of reason why we are fundamental to each of them is my office is involved with the top service level instantiation of the requirements for EMI and spectrum concerns. So we see everything. We see every project for their IC, their JSIDS documents, for spectrum supportability risk assessment. So we have a vital and substantial role in ensuring all these capabilities work together, because, as I mentioned a slide back, my office's role is to ensure cross-warfighting domain electromagnetic compatibility and spectrum supportability. So I'm trying to give you an orientation of where I sit relative to what we're discussing this week. All right, let's go to the next slide. So I'm going to, this and the next are going to get into a little more graphically what Vice Admiral Thomas talked about today. First, for the Navy strategy. And I'm going to draw your attention. So first of all, if you haven't read the NAV Plan 2024, it's not a difficult read. It's about maybe 20 to 30 pages. Not bad at all, really. So you should read it. It's the updated guidance to CNO's unifying vision for the Navy and America's warfighting Navy, and was published in January 2024. Talks about access to and maneuver within electromagnetic spectrum is integral, and it's assumed for the success of CNO's Project 33. It's assumed vice explicit like it is in the DoD spectrum superiority strategy, but nonetheless, you can really immediately infer, and Vice Admiral Thomas confirmed it for us this morning, that spectrum is critical to the success of Project 33. And what I've done here on this slide, as you see in the bold text, I've highlighted 5 of the 7 Project 33 targets that could potentially benefit from dynamic spectrum sharing, and they are certainly exemplars of why I say spectrum is really integral to the success of Project 33. These all constitute the requirements that Navy must translate into our demand signal for spectrum. How much spectrum are we going to need, when and where, to ensure mission success? How much spectrum, in what bands, and with what maneuver characteristics? That's what we need to work toward being able to describe and communicate at leadership levels. Okay, let's go to the next slide, please. So, as I mentioned, this talks about the DoD electromagnetic spectrum superiority strategy. I'm not going to go through a lot of discussion about this, but here you'll see, in particular, the bulletized elements that spectrum, this is squarely and explicitly focused on spectrum and how we at the DoD level are going to get across the services, our strategic messaging and our activities correlated and consistent to ensure our ability to maneuver and maybe, I'll use the word, dominate spectrum. It's a fundamental driver of increased Department of Navy and DoD leadership focus on E-cubed and spectrum challenges. And again, the goal is to increase spectrum maneuver and warfighter impact. Let's go to the next slide, please. So this slide and the next are the one-two punch on Navy messaging, how E-cubed and spectrum concerns are being included at the leadership level. So over the past 12 months, at least over the past 12 months, DoD and Department of Navy and OPNAV leadership have made E-cubed and spectrum concerns and impacts an area of focused attention and effort. All the way from the deck plate to the SysCom concerns and needs and recommendations are being listened to and factored into addressing and influencing what we're doing as a service and as a DoD. And if you're not picking up on it, that includes everything such as the World Radio Conference through these various venues. And I'll just give you a couple of highlights. I regret one of my slides I discarded had the spell out of the EMS SSG. That's the Electromagnetic Spectrum Senior Steering Group, DoD level group, where we get together, and it's usually it has 1-star level representation, and my office certainly supports. In this case, the 1-star is from N26 Whiskey and N26W. That's one of the groups that is involved at the DoD level for DoD level influence. Of course, we all, those of us who have been involved with SRF and the ongoing work, you're familiar with PAS, and including the classified portion of PAS, that's PAS C. Ms. Rathbun, as the DON CIO lead, has established the DON Senior Leaders Spectrum Summit. We participated in that, and on a more regular basis, on a monthly basis, Ms. Edgen, who is Vice Admiral Thomas's deputy, has stood up and chairs the Navy, U.S. Navy Spectrum cross-functional team. And it's at that cross-functional team that we're bringing together a lot of these concerns, and we're getting that leadership buy-in. And so that is chaired at the 3-star level. I'll make a plug that if you, within your leadership chains, I invite you to shoot me an email, and Ms. Edgen is welcoming of participation at leadership level for these discussions about the spectrum concerns and in particular, how do we encapsulate the messaging. And certainly, World Radio Conference, you heard Vice Admiral Thomas mention in his comments today, that's among the things we talk, and it has leadership attention and focus on how do we get the message across, including what venues are we going to engage. So it's what we're working on is messaging at leadership levels. Let's go to the next slide, please. So this is the second of the 1-2 punch of an example of how we're getting the types of message we're ensuring are brought into the discussions. And in particular, I lifted this out of a 2004 MITRE report that really relied a lot on the NTIA data. In this case, articulating the fact that we share more spectrum than we actually own. What I'm hearing, my ears are hearing, is industry continues to say that DoD is hogging spectrum, and that's my gross paraphrase. That's my sarcastic gross paraphrase. But the data shows, as represented here, that we share more spectrum than we actually own. And this is a snapshot back in 2004, and I will assure you, the amount that DoD owns as a percentage has not gone up. It has been decreased, if anything. So it's bringing these messages to the forefront at the top leadership levels. That includes at the DoD level. That includes at the Joint Chiefs level. We're underscoring the message to have it be factual, and to ensure the proper, true perspective of where we stand, where we, Navy, Marine Corps, and our sister services stand relative to our need for spectrum. As noted in the bullets, part of our messaging is that is about the yes, the federal versus exclusive spectrum as depicted by the graphics, but it's also the physics foundations of Navy spectrum-dependent capabilities, and that is a key part, especially of, in particular, the S-band discussions that we continue to have. But there are physics reasons why we, Navy and Marine Corps, selected where in spectrum our systems operate, and we're making sure we articulate that for leadership use, including for communication at the congressional levels. And then another part of our messaging is that the need for technical rigor and process discipline and research. That especially is true as we are pursuing dynamic spectrum sharing. I will say that Ms. Edgen, with a systems engineering background, has really hammered hard home, especially as we pursue dynamic spectrum sharing, the need for rigor and process discipline. Okay. And the other element that's an outgrowth of the work, the engagement at the 3-star level, is finding ways to articulate or leverage in our acquisition processes, such as the Resources and Requirements Review Board, the R3B. How do we get built into those review processes at the top level of acquisition what the spectrum operational characteristics are, so that we can better articulate? We want to get out of the habit of having to issue taskers to ask what are the operational importance, the operational importance and characteristics of these systems in this particular band. We want to have it pushed to us regularly as a part of these scheduled programmatic reviews at the highest level. All right, let's go to the next slide, please. I'm not going to cover this in great detail, other than say I, as the OPNAV lead for E-Cubed and Spectrum, we do have an NTSP. It is grossly in need of an update, last published 2012. So we're working on our next revision. Mr. Rich Segarra is going to talk to you about what we've done more recently, that was back in December, to host a job task analysis workshop with the intent of as not only updating for E-Cubed and Spectrum as we have in the past, but we want to fold in the other for a broader MZO applicability is the way I'll phrase it. So Rich will be talking to you about that. It's on Thursday. Please do join for that conversation so that we can work towards supporting that effort to get it expanded so that we are training our men and women appropriately. Let's go to the next slide, please. Right. So we do have as a Navy instantiation of the SecNav instruction, we have OPNAV instruction 2400. And my deputy, Mr. David Willis, is going to talk about this also on Thursday. I will say this. We had it last signed out in 2021 by Vice Admiral Tressler, and The original Foxtrot version was 40 pages. We streamlined it down to 10, and there is the overall move for these instructions is to reduce their sizes, and so we did find a way to comply with that. However, there were some repercussions, and David's going to talk to you about those details. We know that we need to add in some acknowledgement of what's happening with Spectrum Relocation Fund, SRF. That's part of what's going to be included with the update. But we also found that in our effort to comply with the reduced number of pages, we did lose some information that our systems commands and lower echelons found useful. So we're looking to restore back the information that is necessary. So please join David for that discussion, and he'll do a much more in-depth job of describing what's happening with OPNAV instruction 2400.20 in its update. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so this is it. This is my finish off slide. I did write down quickly this morning the Vice Admiral's a paraphrase of what the Vice Admiral said. Be able to say when spectrum operations are not going right. Now, I paraphrase that. If you didn't hear him say it, he made a comment of, we need to have sailors and Marines who are willing to say when something's not working right so we can get better. It's part of what the Vice Admiral calls get real, get better. So when we have the data calls, it sure does help us when you can participate. Keep your chain of command informed on Spectrum Relocation Fund. I will assure you, I also stole this slide in this case from David. I get to do that. He's my deputy, so I get to do that. But these are all important points that if you can stay engaged with the conversation and keep us aware of what the concerns are, including when things are not going right. An example is, hey, OPNAV instruction 2400.20, when you did that last revision, you really cut out some things that I needed. Okay, then you're going to have to help us make it right. Okay, we don't want to. We would rather get that in the vetting process, but yeah, anytime you can participate in these data calls that go out, it helps us, and we and our leaders are relying on the input so that we can make the positive change for the warfighter so we can get to our desired state of spectrum maneuver. Okay, so I'm done with my pitch. I think that there's no other. Go to the next slide. I want to make sure I've done. Yeah, I got nothing. Contact information if you care to have it. I'm willing to take a question, but I probably ran over my time. Yes. Yep, thanks. Appreciate that.
Good morning, sir. Chief Warrant Officer Hawk, Mar4 Pack again. So I have quite a few questions off of your brief. Is the Department of the Navy drawing a line between EMSO and spectrum management, and spectrum management supports EMSO? Your spectrum manager used to go to Keesler, now going to their own schoolhouse.
Yeah.
So with that, I have follow-on questions, if you can answer that one, sir.
Okay, so the Navy is embracing EMSO, and we are including spectrum management as an element of EMSO. And that was the intent of that graphic that was shown up there. So spectrum management is a core element of RTS, of EMSO. So my office is, so as I mentioned, spectrum management is not just my office, and I didn't mean to imply that's your question, but spectrum management is, as shown in the graphic, considered to be a core fundamental piece of EMSO altogether. So, and is being acknowledged as a fundamental discipline with core to EMSO. So I'm really not answering your question
It does answer the question, sir. And then I should educate myself on the 2400 TAC 20. Probably states it out in that document. But doing the walkthrough at McKinney yesterday was also eye-opening, right? Like, where's your guys' spectrum manager? Oh, yeah, we don't have one.
Yep, I
That's a
heard that
carrier.
too.
That's your fleet, the carriers, then subs, then all the rest of the ships. So carriers don't have spectrum managers. When we ask what they do to monitor their spectrum to enforce SACON guidance or MCON, they go, oh, we got this thing called RTSO. And then when I ask the question, other individuals that have Navy background, I ask them, well, what sensors do you have that are feeding your RTSO? Nobody knew except for the individuals that we were with that were on the ship with the program offices or working at Navware. They had the answers to answer for the people on the bridge. These are the people operating the ship, your RTSO. And we use words like spectrum, maneuver, diversity, superiority, dominance. We cannot dominate, maneuver anything. Spectrum managers in our previous role, administrative role, we will go out there and get you all the resources you need.
Yeah.
The MSON and maneuverability is going to be with sensors to be able to get that real-time information so we can be able to maneuver in the spectrum of the resources provided. So I feel like being that close with IMSO, like how we're going to operationalize in the Marine Corps and have spectrum professionals down at the lowest level, I feel like that's the only way, and especially at a carrier, you got to have those spectrum managers. Maybe it's BICT and they have a shortage right now, so more follow-on questions, and then kind of where with your schoolhouse standing up, and maybe somebody will have it in a brief while we're here, is what is the Navy schoolhouse for spectrum professionals going to provide, and maybe it's going to be more of these MSO professionals with spectrum management. So just questions for the group, and then we don't have to answer them, just to think about in the back of your head during the conference.
Yeah, but definitely want to make sure we get you linked up with Rich Segura, who's has the lead on the NTSP and the training matters, including what your concerns are about the schoolhouse. So, Rich, I saw you in here this morning. I want to make sure we get you linked up. Thanks. Thank you, sir. Yes.
Hey, I'm Brad Thompson from Marine Corps Systems Command, Ground-Based Air Defense Program Office. So this is a question, it has to do with the SRF funds and how everything comes about. And I know this is it's a big topic, and not looking for a direct answer, and I know this is universal. But when it comes to all Navy and Marine Corps programs that are impacted by SRF, especially from an acquisition perspective, we're looking at a POM and a fit-up process. And a lot of times we don't know how much money or how soon that funding, if any funding, may come available. So the question from leadership at a SysCom perspective is when we educate them on what is going on with vacate or sharing spectrum, that they are always asking, okay, then we need to put it in the POM, we need to ask for funding. And then we try to explain SRF funding, and it gets very confusing. And then there's a sense of fear from program managers of, well, I don't know that I'm going to get that money. I don't know how to do like what is going on, and it's always I guess the flash to bang on when NTIA makes a decision on funding or what is going to be funded or of how much, and then it goes down to DoD, and then all the way down comes down to those offices. Next thing you know, there's a big pot of money, and it's kind of how soon do we have, what do we do? So as far as kind of learning from the past 4 or 5 years of this happening, from vacating, especially in the S-band spectrum, what will the future be on how fast we can get information to those individual program offices? Because it's not just relocating. There's a training impact. There's a development impact. There are range. I mean, all those things. And I see them all on the slides when we're talking about that, but that's kind of I guess, a big question, and this may not be the exact right time to answer that, but I just want to toss it out there because I think that it's pretty important with what's going on right now, and maybe we can manage that this week.
Take it. Come on up.
From a Marine Corps standpoint, right? I just had a long conversation last week with one of the program officers out of Systems Command, right? From the Marine Corps standpoint, what we plan to do for that is we plan on doing a surf roadshow, right, to get out to the program officers within Systems Command to explain the process, to explain the timelines and so on and so forth, right? We are in the end of 2 auctions or nearing the end of 2 auctions, just about in the middle of 3 prior auctions where we either shared or receive funding to look at the band for out-of-band emissions and so on and so forth, right? So there's a lifespan for each auction, right? And I give it to you, right? It hasn't been done, right? It's been a learning process over the previous auctions, right? So we're trying to get ahead of that from the Marine Corps standpoint to get out there and do a road show, to hit the systems command, to actually head down to the operating units, right? Because this is starting to knock on the door of the bases where the industry, the AT&Ts and so on and so forth are knocking at the doors and coming out there to do testing and so on and so forth. So that's how we plan to approach that and deal with those situations and answer those questions. I'll be here for the entire week, and I am more than happy to go in depth in conversations with you in reference to answering any questions that you may have.
Yeah, I'll just chime in on top of that. We've got the Don CIO SRF team here as well. They can talk about procedures, processes, and getting information, so on. So I think you'll have enough expertise in the room this week if you want to explore a little more in depth.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, folks.
So, Vic, this one.